with a curse, Lyle Skag Worsham was ordered out of the car and told to, quote, run for your life. Up the dusty road, aimed toward him, were the lights of an array of cars and men armed with pistols. Worsham had talked too much to rival gangsters, the Shelton Brothers. So Birger Gang members went and picked him up at Ziegler, Illinois on the night of September 17, 1926. And they compelled him to, quote, take a ride, end quote. They took Worsham before Charles Birger. Gang member Harvey Dungy charged the youth with talking too much to rival gang leader Carl Shelton, despite Worsham's protests of innocence. Well, Birger passed sentence. Worsham was to run the Machine-gun Gauntlet. He was compelled to ride with Dungy, Fred Butch Thomason, and Joe Booker, all Birger Gang members or affiliates. Behind that car was a large sedan. In it sat Charles Birger, gang chieftain, and unnamed others. As Worsham ran from the car, he weaved to try to dodge the stream of pistol fire. He stumbled, at which point a machine gun opened fire from Birger's sedan, cutting him down dead. According to July and August 1927 testimony, and according to Sheriff Orrin Coleman of Bloody Williamson County in southern Illinois, Birger reprimanded the machine gun wielding gangsters, saying it would, quote, be a giveaway because other people didn't use machine guns, end quote. Sadly, Worsham's body was unceremoniously dragged and dumped into some roadside weeds. But later, it was retrieved, taken to an abandoned house, and burned along with the structure. That story was corroborated by 3 unnamed gangsters, quote, who said they were along on the ride, end quote. We know that Thomason and Booker were later held on murder charges in Worsham's death. And we followed and updated on Charles Birger, who was by August of 1927, quote, sentenced to be hanged, end quote, for the assassination of West City, Illinois Mayor Big Joe Adams. And we know several Birger henchmen were already serving sentences, while others who'd been implicated in the Worsham killing were themselves dead. The Sunday Star's August 14 story, Brutal Murder Charged to Gang, subtitled Man Who Talked Too Much, Forced to Run Gauntlet of Machine Gun Fire. Well, it depicts the real level of violence and the dark side of the Roaring Twenties and gets us started on brutal true crimes in this August 1927 decades of heistery. In fact, the Cordell Dispatch ran Bandits Use Poison Needle to Rob Youth. We head to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where we come across a modernized and frightening version of the Mickey Finn. Reginald Freeman, 16, was a messenger of the Yazoo and Mississippi Valley Railroad. Freeman told police he was accosted by 2 men in front of the state capitol building on August 17th, while returning from the post office with a bag of registered mail. One man shoved a poison needle into his arm, threw him into the vehicle, and watched as Freeman lost consciousness. Later, Freeman awoke, quote, hardly able to talk, end quote, on the riverbank near St. Gabriel, Louisiana, which was about 16 miles south of Baton Rouge. While not a bank robbery, it pairs neatly with the Machine-gun Gauntlet to take some of the shine or of the glory off of the Roaring Twenties imagery. Thankfully, not everyone employed such terrifying tactics. For a more gentle approach, that of foisting a revolver in a person's face, we turn back to our blonde, bobbed-haired teen, Viola Harris. Or, according to the Washington Times and its bob-haired bandit gets 3-year term, the robber Viola Harris was actually Thelma Christler. She had lied to police when she was caught robbing the People's Savings Bank in Saginaw, Michigan. Recall, she passed a check through the teller's cage with, quote, "make it snappy," end quote, written on it, and she was demanding exactly $5,000. At the time, the teller dropped to his knees and hit the alarm, drawing a swarm of citizens and police very quickly. So Harris, Christler, then fell into the patrolman's arms and wept. During her trial, she told the court the attempted theft and the specific amount was to pay off her father's home mortgage. When Judge William H. Martin recommended 3 years in the Detroit House of Correction, she took the sentence calmly. So we've seen that some were violent and others attempted to be crafty, but some were also bad luck magnets who were actually trying to reform, yet somehow found themselves in trouble just the same. So for that, we revisit Herbert Schaus, courtesy of Montgomery Advertiser, and its story, Paroles Sought for Phoenix City Bank Robber and Baldwin Murder Convict. Our January 1927 main story video, titled Recklessness and Reckonings, introduced the $44,000 robbery at Tarrant City, Alabama, which was a suburb of Birmingham. And on the same day, a $15,000 heist at the Tarrant City Savings Bank. At that time, airplanes even took to the skies to search along with posses that were on the ground. Schaus was working for a taxi company and had a solid alibi, but was taken in, probably based on the fact that he, with a number of other defendants, had been convicted of complicity for the Phoenix Girard bank robbery way back in 1921, for which he had served a 6-year term. Currently being considered were 32 applications for executive clemency, and that included the reinstatement of Herbert Schaus's parole. He'd been on parole, which is why he was working for the taxi company, but Governor Brandon revoked his parole after Schaus's newest arrest, as being a suspect in connection with one or both of those Tarrant City heists noted above. Now, Schaus was asking for the parole's reinstatement and even presented evidence that he had no connection with either bank job and that his rearrest and imprisonment were dubious. And speaking of dubious connections to crimes, we once again, and for the last time it appears, engage with Celestino Madeiros, along with his connection to Sacco and Vanzetti. Ultimately, it seems that the consensus is that Sacco may well have been involved, but Vanzetti probably was not. It still remains an historical mystery. We surveyed 20 different newspapers, including 59 prints, for August's coverage of the Sacco and Vanzetti saga, from the 2nd of August to the 28th. Again, our connection is through Celestino Madeiros, admitted bank robber and murderer. While in prison, he confessed to being part of the real gang that committed the South Braintree, Massachusetts payroll murder heist. His confession made the imprisonment of Sacco and Vanzetti the real crime, if his confession was truthful. The coverage included Sacco on a massive hunger strike, a denial of clemency, nationwide strikes being threatened, including cigar workers and barbers, bomb threats, and actual bomb blasts in the New York City subway, the Baltimore mayor's home, and even a church in Philadelphia. Bombings and riots were threatened or realized in Uruguay and Boston and in Chicago too. There was a stay of execution that came 1 hour before Madeiros, Sacco, and Vanzetti were set to go to the electric chair. Their case then went to the Supreme Court, while we saw Sacco complete his 27th day of a hunger strike. There were more explosions, global strikes suggested, and then reality set in. The bodies of Sacco and Vanzetti, when the inevitable happened, were going to lie in state with death masks to be distributed to the public. And then their bodies were going to be paraded around the East Coast. Well, all three died in the electric chair for their crimes, real or not. Well, there is little to no question about the guilt of two men and their flapper Malls who disappeared into the Devil's Hole Mountain wilderness. We just covered them in the July 1927 Virginia Flapper Heist and Texas Bandit Queen video. Well, the August 1st Evening Star picked right up and ran Trail of Bandits is Lost in Rains. It was subtitled Posse Handicapped in Search for Quartet of Robbers. Heavy rain in the area swelled mountain brooks that became torrents and led to covered and destroyed tracks. In fact, there was no trace discovered since Tuesday when heel marks of women's shoes were found near the fake abandoned car. All posses on the Virginia side of the mountain had been withdrawn by Sheriff B.M. Borden, as he believed they'd already escaped the area. But natives of the area believed that they were holed up in a camp somewhere in the woodland and they were being fed by relatives. Detectives were still seeking leads and scouring the captured letters that they'd gotten for clues, and letters to Helen Blackwell revealed that she had destroyed all the envelopes that would have had addresses on them. However, letters to Betty Buddy Wilson had intact envelopes and did provide some information. One letter, quote, in striking contrast to the notes penned by many admirers, unquote, was from someone named Little Sister, and she was back home in Niagara Falls, New York. Little Sister expressed appreciation for, quote, the nice new dress, end quote, and informed the unidentified flapper that their mother and father weren't doing well and that they hoped the unnamed daughter would come home soon. In other words, the quartet was indeed still on the lam. From the hollers of Virginia to the Pacific coast we go, where it appears that two separate gangs struck San Francisco and Oakland banks almost simultaneously. The Seward Daily Gateway ran, robbers obtained big sums from Oakland and Frisco banks, subtitled $22,000 as rich haul of masked men, employees forced to lie on floor. On August 8th, 4 bank robbers hit the Hayes and Octavia branch of the French American Bank in San Francisco. It was an early afternoon strike and scored the quartet $6,000. One robber cleaned out all the cash while the other 3 covered the employees, who were, of course, forced to lie on the floor. About 1 hour later, over in Oakland, 2 unmasked men hit the 41st and Broadway branch of the Bank of Italy. They left there $16,000 richer. Police were certain that the heists were done by 2 separate robbery combines. Well, south of the Bay Area we go, where we see an LA story that looks like one of amateurish temptation rather than worldly professional crime. The Imperial Valley Press ran former teller under arrest. Indeed, F. Harold Flynn, only 24, was a former teller of the Merchants National Trust and Savings Bank, and he'd been charged with embezzling $4,200. Flynn had been taken into custody by national bank examiners. According to Deputy U.S. Marshal Vincent Mangarina, Flynn admitted to a shortage in his accounts and resigned, quote, several months ago, end quote. Flynn said his parents had sold their home in order to raise the funds, which he took in small amounts, declaring he would pay the money back. Flynn was hoping to secure probation in order to work and earn the balance of the money. There was no mystery in this story, but the next story, all of one line, is quite the opposite. According to the August 13 New Britain Daily Herald, a mysterious walled shaft was found in an unnamed bank building as firemen fought a blaze in New Britain, Connecticut. Was the shaft part of an older structure, or were yeggs at work building a way to slip in and out of the bank unnoticed? In Florida, we see yet another approach to swindling our neighbor. Florida farmer gets fake money ran in the August 2nd Cordell Dispatch. Quote, raised or counterfeit money whose denomination was physically manipulated and adjusted higher was found in Gadsden County, Florida. Farmers in Bristol and other Wauchula County towns were the victims. What they got were $1 banknotes, but over that $1 numeral was, quote, skillfully posted larger numbers, end quote, which appeared to have been taken from Confederate notes. For example, a Confederate $50 bill had that $50 symbol cut from the note and adhered over the $1 U.S. note. Farmer James Brown showed up in Quincy, Florida, and offered to pay a bill with a $20 banknote. The man to whom it was paid accidentally noticed that the, quote, $20 on the note was peeling off, end quote. He examined the note closely and noted that the larger denomination had been cut and pasted onto it, which incidentally does not sound skillful. Farmer Brown pulled out 2 other bills that were exactly the same. According to federal authorities, the work was, quote, that of an artist. Well, we meander further south to Miami for the next story that involves absolutely no artistry. Instead, dejection, despair, and possibly regret. Bank official ends life was subtitled Miami Man Found Dead in Auto on Beach. And that story ran in the August 12th Evening Star. Joe Lawler, 35, was an assistant cashier at the Meyer Kaiser Bank. His body was found by Miami police on August 11th. The coroner determined that he had taken his own life, and police said that Lawler used a pistol. We're not sure if the, quote, investigation of his records was ordered by the bank, end quote, before or after he took his life due to a failed embezzlement, or if it was despondency over life in general. Perhaps embezzlement was in the air, for we head back out west to the West Coast, where we see the Imperial Valley Press running its August 24th edition. Wattersons May Seek Probation was the story, and it covered the arraignment of Wilfred W. and Mark Q. Watterson. The brothers were Inyo County bankers, and their pleas to charges of embezzlement were postponed until the next day. Their 5 banks were closed 3 weeks ago after shortages of over $800,000 had been discovered. It was unknown whether they would plead guilty, not guilty, or if they would ask for an extension in order to be able to enter a plea. The latter was expected since their lawyers F.C. Brocht and B.G. Preston had withdrawn from the case. It does not sound favorable for the Wattersons. The Wattersons were also charged with mishandling bank funds and embezzlement of $421,000 from the Owens Valley Irrigation District where they were officers. I'm always curious how white-collar criminals were treated back then versus the more rough-and-tumble bandits. Here's our final example. The Seward Daily Gateway brought us a story from Seattle, Washington. Nationwide search for secretary ends. It appears that a 4-month search ended on August 23rd with the arrest of John G. Shaw, former secretary of the Terre Haute Savings Bank. He'd been arrested by city detectives near the home of his aged mother and was accused of embezzling over $50,000. So how will the Wattersons fare, or John Shaw? No violence was employed in either case, but they still robbed substantial amounts of money from banks. From machine-gun gauntlets to Mickey Fins, from forgers to flappers, the crimes of the 1920s were often anything but glamorous. Whether you were a girl with a revolver or a banker with a balance sheet, if you fled to the mountains or headed to the ocean, one thing is clear, and that's the Roaring Twenties were grittier, bloodier, and far more dangerous than the jazz and speakeasies led on. Stick around. Next up will be the murder and near decapitation of a minister.